Hey everybody, Josh Runquist here, and it's time for my brand new show, Out Today and What I've Missed. Now this is basically gonna be like my top 10 albums of the month series that I used to do for the past couple years, but that's over now, as I'm going to be doing this weekly. So basically the same rules. Everything will be in alphabetical order. I'll start off talking about the albums that came out today, and then I'll talk about all the albums that I missed after that. Except for this very first show, since it is the last Friday of January, I'm just going to consider them all albums that I've missed because I pretty much took off all of January and I've been playing catch up. But there's been a lot of great albums that have come out this month already. And you will also notice I don't have the text on the screen anymore. I'm going to leave that for the description down below. That way, when I put these up as Instagram stories or YouTube shorts or possibly even TikTok, it won't look as crappy, and you'll wonder what the words actually say. Just look at the description down below. But until then, let's get right into it with our very first album that I'll be talking about.
Come on, if this stuff is too nice for you, I've got some crap.
First up, I have the band Abhoria with their sophomore album, Depths. And this is an absolutely bonkers album that goes from the absolute metal extremes to near doom metal and everything in between. It's a real harsh listen, but it's also for those that love the styles of music like I do. Basically a mix of Anaal Nathrakh and Akercocke vocals. You mix those together and you have one of the darkest American metal albums of 2024 so far. I know that's kind of weird to say with it only being January, but hey, this is right up there. This album is a fantastic listen for those that love the extreme side of things and is well worth your time.
All in all, it's a fine day for an apocalypse.
Next up, we have Ancient Wisdom with Master of the Stone. Now, this is an album I've been waiting for quite a bit of time, as the last Ancient Wisdom album came out in 2019, I believe, and that is too long of a wait. And I'm so glad the band is back, and it feels like they really know what to do with their audience, and give everyone everything. If you love the acoustic side that they did on albums like A God Like Inferno, that is here. If you like the more metal side, that's here as well. If you want the more hard rock and catchy side, of course, that is here as well. And of course with Nathan Opposition and Nathan Yakum being busy in their own stuff right now, being in Nunslaughter or doing DJ gigs with some nice metal gothic stuff going on, of course they're going to be a little busy. And I'm so glad that they came back together and reignited Ancient Wisdom, as this is some of the best material the band has done to date. It might take a few spins, but once you get into it, you can't stop.
Sacrilegious.
Next, we have the 6th album from Caligula's Horse, Charcoal Grace. And this band has expanded upon their sound, but also know what really works for the band. They know when they get proggy, they know when they get heavy. They have some magnificent production on this album, arguably the best production the band has done to date. It feels like everything is going right for this band, and seeing all of the promotion the band has gotten over the years, and just seeing their steady climb, it is so fantastic to see. And I imagine in 2024, more people will be able to jump on the Caligula's Horse train, which is ironic when you think about it, but I really love what's going on with this album, and I think it's going to be one of the finest prog metal albums of 2024.
Charcoal?
Next up is the 3rd album from the UK outfit Cognizance, with the album Phantazein. And this album feels like an album that really combines the best elements of like tech death and deathcore, but also with really old school death metal at the same time. Like whenever I hear something that sounds like the Faceless or Veil of Penanth or the Zenith Passage, I also hear elements of Bloodbath, especially the Michael Akerfeld era of Bloodbath, especially in the vocals. And it's a really good combination. They know when to be technical, when to hold back and just groove and just do some nice heavy OSDM. It's a great combination, and I hope more bands kind of follow in this trend where you just don't have to do technical fretboard Olympics all the time. It's a nice balance, and if you're looking for something not too technical but not too old school, this might be an album for you.
Do you hear that? Listen.
Yes.
And it is beautiful.
Up next, we have the sophomore album from the band Disconnected Souls, with Fragments of Consciousness. Now, this album is quite the trip. It has a lot of modern metal elements, a little bit of melodic death metal, almost getting into deathcore territories at times, but it's also balanced out by more dance music, EDM, rave kind of stuff. It really feels cinematic, and they describe themselves as a cinematic metal band, and I think that perfectly makes sense. Every song feels like it's telling a story. Is it all connected? I'm not entirely sure, but when you listen to it, it feels like a great album experience from start to finish. I know this won't be for everyone, especially if you're not into the more dancey kind of things. It can be a little jarring for you, but if you do want to experiment with your tastes, I think Disconnected Souls could be something you're really into. And if you're into bands like Rage of Light, you need to check out Disconnected Souls.
Can be yellow if they're using late season apples. And of course in Canada the whole thing's flip-flop.
Up next is the debut album from Domination Campaign, A Storm of Steel. Featuring members of Psychroptic, Joe, and Jason, it's great to see them expanding beyond the tech death realm and going something a bit more straight ahead death metal. Like, they really focus on the death metal grooves on this one. You can still kind of hear that Psychroptic influence on here, but it's more straight back and has more of that early to mid 90s feel. And a little bit more like in the triggers department. I mean, you obviously will hear the triggers, but I think it still balances out into a nice, great blend of old school death metal. And for anyone that loves tech death but is kind of bored by normal death metal, should give this album a shot, because if Psychroptic can appreciate the old school death metal, so can you.
What's that?
War were declared.
Next is the band Fragments of Lost Memories with Yakusoku, which is Japanese for promise. And considering this is the band's 5th album in 3 years, you would sure think that whether this is a one-man project, a full-on band, the members aren't included, so I don't know who's really a part of this. You would think still, 5 albums in 3 years, that you would kind of run out of ideas by now, but that is certainly not the case. The band starts off with a near 32-minute epic, and it's absolutely insane at that. I really don't get to hear much of the Japanese funeral doom stuff. Of course, I miss bands like Corrupted, but it's great to have a band like this going around, and I hope that they continue to flourish, because I need some more Japanese-style funeral doom metal in my life, and so do you.
Dance, you sons of bitches! Dance like it's me down there!
Next up, we have Fugit with Bury Me Here. The 7th album from this one-man Italian Blackgaze band is something to truly behold. It's so dark, it's so ethereal, but it hits so perfectly, with very dark, depressing lyrics, a very raw production, but not too raw, kind of like what I talked about in the last review about black metal, sometimes just sounding like it's on Fisher-Price material. This is a step above that, but everything here just sounds incredible. With some guest female vocals, the one-man band does everything himself on this album and just has a great ethereal, dark feel behind it. And if you need some Blackgaze in 2024, you don't need to look much further than this. This is some of the best Blackgaze I've heard in quite some time.
I hate to rain on your parade, lady, but this is my grave.
Up next, we have Lucid Funeral with Terminal Lucidity. The debut album from this band is mind-blowing. Considering the ages of everyone in this band, considering the vocalist, guitarist, and main songwriter of the band, who has his own YouTube channel, Rav Riffs, is 20 years old. This is some absolutely killer stuff that really has that love of 90s progressive death metal and progressive black metal. If you like Dissection, Emperor, Death, Incantation, Atheist, all of these bands, there's something to love about this. It has a great, dark, grimacing feel behind it. It has a nice, raw production that really matches the mood of all of that, but it's done through a 2024 filter, and it's so fantastic to hear. If this is what they're doing on their debut album, I can't wait to see what's next. And especially when you're only 20 years old and putting out music like this, you have your whole life ahead of you to be able to put out more amazing music.
My only regret is that I have bonitis.
Next up, we have Lucifer with Lucifer V. I can't believe this band is already 5 albums in, and they just sound stronger and stronger with absolutely every single release. I argue this may be the best Lucifer album to date. It just hits that perfect tone of that classic doom metal sound, that occult rock sound, and being super, super catchy. The production on here is stellar. Everyone a part of the band now really feels like they're focused in and making the best stuff possible. Everything here is just going in the right direction. And if you love that occult rock sound and you're not a Lucifer fan, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. Check them out now. One of the best bands in the style going, and it only takes one listen to understand why.
That's a clean burning hell, I tell you what.
Next up, we have the band Mega Colossus with Showdown. And I didn't realize 2 of the members of this band used to be a part of Bloody Hammers, one of my favorite gothic tinged bands. And no, Mega Colossus does not sound like that. They are straight up American-bred heavy metal. And it's so cool to hear that too, the diversity that musicians can have. And going into this style, it really does have that American flair of heavy metal going on with it. Of course, it's got the fantasy-style lyrics, and you can hear the new wave of British heavy metal going through there, but they're really making it their own. And that's why I really like the revival-style metal bands that have been going on for quite some time now. There needs to be more bands like this, especially in America, and while the group is still going strong, I mean the genre group, there can always be more, and I'm excited to hear what Mega Colossus does next.
The Mayor, starring Homer Simpson.
Up next, we have Mourning Dawn with their 6th album, The Foam of Despair. This is the first album I've heard from this band, and honestly, I gotta hand it, Banger TV is actually what showed me this band for the very first time, and I am so intrigued. Blackened doom metal with some avant-garde tendencies. Like on the very first song, you'll hear some saxophone in there, which oddly fits and gives it kind of a noir kind of feel behind it. And there's some other elements that you just don't expect that happens towards the end, like a little more electronica moments, which you wouldn't think works, at least on paper, but in execution it works so perfectly. Black and Doom, being able to be experimental with it, and one of the finest albums of January 2024. I'm so excited that I found out about this band, and hey, since I did, I got 5 more albums I gotta check out.
Doom!
Up next is the legendary Ribspreader with Reap Humanity, the band's 10th album, and wouldn't you know it, most of the band resides in the US now, considering Taylor and Jeremy are of the band The Absence and the very underrated Necromancing the Stone. It is so great to see this band come back in full force like this and put out just that classic 90s old school death metal sound. That HM2 pedal is in full force here. Thank you, Dan Swano, for making that popular. This is so fantastic of that old school style. And even though the band started in the 2000s, it just has that love for that old school style. It introduces a little bit of newer influences once in a while, but not really anything that would take away from the sound. Just pure, unadulterated OSDM. And if you need that, you need this.
Well, the real humans won't burn quite so fast in there. Why?
Up next, we have the debut album from Tracy Guns and Jack Russell with Russell Guns and Medusa. This album is actually a really fun throwback to 80s style, and unlike so many bands, especially when I was growing up, where you were an 80s band and you just decided to write nothing but acoustic ballads that were almost feeling like contemporary acoustic Christian music for some reason, this is just old school 80s hard rock, heavy metal, and AOR. I wouldn't want anything else from these guys, but they actually did this, which is what I wanted from the project. There's some nice heavy songs on here, there's some very, very intriguing ballads on here as well, but an overall feel that this is an album that they wanted to make together, and I'm so glad that they did. And if you are a little bit concerned about this, just give it a shot, especially if you love that 80s glam, hard rock, heavy metal sound.
It says here we're right.
Up next is the debut album from this Barcelona band known as Santa Cruz, and their album, which I cannot pronounce, but I did find the English translation of Songs of Love, Grief, and Longing. Of course, I will have the real title in the description down below. But this album is absolutely stellar. It combines some great post-metal elements, some great doom metal elements, some Blackgaze a little bit in there as well. So if you're looking for something that kind of has like an Alcest feel but doomier, if you're looking for something like Cult of Luna but done in a little bit of a different style, if you're looking for some Lantlos kind of thing going on, there's something to be found in there in strides. Again, I don't really understand what's going on lyrically, but you can kind of get the idea from the English translation that there is a lot of love, loss, and what to do with life. And of course, I'm always there for that.
Hey, what you crying for, boy? It's a good show.
Next up is an early contender for Album of the Year 2024, and yes, it is only the end of January, but we'll see what happens. This is Hegel with Traverse the Balak. And this is an absolutely killer album from this one-man project. Of course, being in bands like Fallock and Seor, there's a little bit of that folkish black metal element going on, but it's more in the background this time around. It's really focused more on kind of progressive metal, progressive post-metal, doom metal. It's a really cool combination. I can hear Catatonia in this, I can hear Borknagar in this, especially in the vocals. The final track has a huge Devin Townsend feel behind it. It's a real love letter to progressive metal through a more northern UK black metal feel behind it, but with all clean vocals. And that's right up my alley, and wouldn't you know it, it could be up yours as well. Seriously, give this one a shot.
Yes, this guy rules. Yes.
And there you go, folks. 17 brand new albums from January 2024. Did you find some new discoveries here? Is there anything that might be up your alley? Is there anything you checked out and not your bag? Am I stupid for my opinions on these? Let me know all of this down below. And from next Friday going forward, this will be every single week. So this will be the longest episode of this series because I had to catch up with all of January. Again, next week going forward, it will be weekly, so every album that comes out during that week and anything else that I need to catch up on will be on every show going forward. Thanks again for taking the time to check this out. I'm excited to see what 2024 is going to bring for Heavy Debriefings, and I hope you stick around. And until then, this is Josh Runquist for Heavy Debriefing saying, embrace the skullet.